In the last vignette, we have been discussing religion and emotion, and we proved to you and showed you that these two can never go together. Because if you put them together, emotion becomes a very great source of self-deception. Your emotions can bring you to error and you would never notice it. We have noticed that in the example of Peter and the Jewish people when they first shouted Hosanna and a few days later on crucify him. But this emotionalism, which was the main prerogative of the other Christian sect, is now entering the Catholic Church. There is so much emotionalism within the Catholic Church. It began with the songs and now the dancing and the clapping. Well, a beautiful Catholic ceremony must be cold and formal. Cold and formal. And we should not be ashamed of that, because you might say, but it might not attract the young generation. Of course it will attract them if they are seeking the truth. If they are not seeking the truth, even romantic songs will not attract them. But it has to be formal and cold. Many people do not realize it, but when a liturgy is cold and formal, it shows the highest perfection in the liturgy. Because the liturgy is an act of worship. You are before God and you're going to be informal. You are before God and you're going to crack jokes. No, it has to be cold and formal. It has to be quiet and serene. It must be dark. So more or less it is a prayer that rises just between you and God. That's the reason why in the Catholic liturgy we sing Gregorian chant. Gregorian chant has that beautiful characteristic that it stills the emotion. It gives calmness and serenity to the spirit. So when the people are singing, their minds are really rising up to God in prayer. Unlike most of the modern songs, the moment it begins, your attention is taken away from the Blessed Sacrament, from the sacrifice of the Mass, and it goes to the rhythm and the beat of the song, which really is very distractive. In all things, we must behave like Christ. And we have seen in the past vignettes how Christ behaved. Everything was under control. There were no exuberance or tumultuous exhilaration, nothing at all. Everything was cold, formal, and serene. And picture here the time when Christ taught us how to pray. Now that must be the same model we must adopt in our prayer meetings, and the liturgy of the Mass. And so the apostles asked Jesus Christ, Lord, teach us to pray. And notice that his prayer was not long. It was not emotional. It was not vehement. Everything was serious, grave, simple, deliberate, and full of deep-seated humility. Others might say that this is a boring liturgy if you do something like that. But that is, as I repeat, perfection in prayer. That everything is short, there is no unnecessary words in your prayer. Everything is recited calmly, and the things that you ask are only those things which are necessary for salvation. Now, we mentioned before that there are emotions which are really no-nos, and there are emotions which can be used temporarily for the good of a person. It can be used, but I repeat, temporarily. A very good example of this is Mary Magdalene. When she was shedding tears, she was sad, she felt so bad because of her past life. But keep in mind that Christ immediately raised her up over and above her emotions. If Mary Magdalene kept those emotions during her life, she would have been lost, completely lost. She could have turned heretical even. But let us look at one man, one possessed by the devil. The story tells us that there was a young man who was possessed by the devil, and Christ saw him, Christ approached him and drove the devil out of him. And this man was so excited, he was exhilarated. Now this is true joy and this is true emotions. He was excited because he was freed from the devil. He was like a newborn man who was beginning to live now in a new world. And now this excitement was so great in him that he looked at Christ and said, "Lord, can I follow you?" Now, why did the young man want to follow Christ? Well, maybe he was afraid that the devil might come back into him. Or maybe he was so repentant of his past life and he wanted to live a new life. And so he truly wanted to follow Christ. But what did Christ tell him? "Go home," he says, "and tell those around you, your family and your friends, the things I have done for you. Go home." Now, this is quite strange because many of the people that Christ met, like the three young men too, Christ told them to leave home and follow him. The example, first of all, is the young man who wanted to bury his dead father. And what did Christ say? "Let the dead bury the dead. You come and follow me. Leave your home." And the same thing with the young man who wanted to say goodbye before he followed Christ. Now, he was going to follow Christ. He just wanted to go home just for a short time and say goodbye. And Christ says, "No one who puts his hands on the plow and looks back is worthy of me." So Christ is trying to say, leave everything and follow me. On the case of the third young man, the young rich man, Christ also told him to come follow me. But before following Christ, he told him to go home, sell all his things, and give it to the poor. Now, notice here that the reasons that the three presented were all emotional. Their emotions were preventing them from following Christ. One was emotionally attached to his dead father. The other was emotionally attached to his family, so he wanted to say goodbye. And the other one was emotionally attached to his wealth. Christ loved to test our faith. So when he sees you loving your home, he tells you to leave your home and come follow him. And when you want to follow him, he tells you to go home to test precisely your faith. Go home, Christ said, and tell your friends the wonders I have done for you. Go home and show them that before you were doing things badly, but now you will do things well. That before you were so attached to the things of the world, but now you are detached from the things of the world. That before you served the world and you served man, but now you are serving me. Give them good example. Show them that now you are a different person. Show them that now you have changed because of what Christ had done for you. Go home, Christ said. Return to your pursuits and your occupation. Go back to your friends and your families. But show them the difference, that now your mind is enlightened, that now you are fervent in following the steps of Christ by simply obeying His commands among them. For people who start their spiritual life young, there is not much problem. The burden of Christ is sweet and light, and it is so easy for them to follow Christ immediately. When the young are invited by Christ to follow Him, they can follow Him immediately. Our problem is for those whose youth was sinful, who began ill in their spiritual life. It's not easy for them to follow Christ right away, and the yoke of Christ is not light nor sweet for them. And therefore, what must they do? If you find a young person who had lived an evil life and now is excited to be converted, where should he begin? Well, if you will notice, the commands of Christ has an order. He has to follow the right order. And the right order is the life of obedience. You see, for children, obedience is not difficult. But for the young people and the grown-ups, it's terribly difficult. It is an uphill climb. That is why they need the excitement. They need it in order to be converted. So here is an example where we are using emotions or feeling, excitement, to make those who have lived sinful life jump over the hurdle of a life of obedience that will lead them to the following of Christ. God bless you.